She slammed the glass down in front of me, the sweet tea laced with something bitter I couldn't taste. My head spun, my body collapsed into the chair. Before I could speak, she yanked my limp hand, pressed my finger hard against a document, then onto her phone screen. Papers scattered across the floor, her eyes wild with triumph. I gasped for breath, struggling to understand why was my own daughter doing this to me. What could drive a child to betray the very mother who gave her everything? If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. My name is Helen Mitchell, and I am 65 years old. For most of my life, I believed that peace in one's heart could be found in family. That belief was what kept me going after my husband passed away, and it was what I held on to every morning when I looked out the kitchen window of my little house in Columbus, Ohio. The maple trees in the yard, the familiar creak of the porch steps, the sound of the church bells on Sunday, these small things became anchors for me. They reminded me that even though life takes and takes, there are blessings left if you know where to look. I never thought that danger, betrayal, or heartbreak would come from within my own home. I had worked as a school secretary for decades, pinching pennies and saving carefully. My late husband and I were not wealthy people, but we were diligent. We bought our house in the suburbs and paid it off. We had a modest retirement account. I even kept a small box of keepsakes, old photographs, jewelry from my mother, and the deed to the house locked safely away. All of it was meant to secure the future of the one person I loved most in this world. My daughter, Samantha. Samantha was my only child. She came into this world on a stormy April evening, and from the moment I held her, I believed she was my purpose. I did what most mothers do. I poured everything into raising her. I worked long hours at the school, sometimes taking on evening tasks, just so she could have new clothes or go on school trips. I skipped vacations and luxuries so that she would never feel the sting of going without. When she graduated from college, I was the proudest woman in the auditorium, clapping until my hands ached. But children grow, and they change. Somewhere along the way, Samantha's dreams of success twisted into a hunger for more money, more recognition, more of everything that life could hand out. At first, I thought it was natural, even admirable. I told myself she was ambitious. That was good, wasn't it? This was America, after all, the land of opportunity. But as the years went by, I noticed that her ambition was not rooted in hard work. Instead, it leaned toward shortcuts, quick gains, and a restless dissatisfaction with what she had. Still, she was my daughter. When she came to visit me at the house, I felt a kind of comfort. She would sit across from me at the kitchen table, sipping the coffee I made for her, her polished nails tapping against the ceramic mug. She asked questions about the house, about my accounts, about whether I had updated my will. She framed it as concern, saying things like, "Mom, I just want to make sure everything is in order, in case something happens." I wanted to believe she cared. I wanted to believe her motives were pure. Looking back, I see the signs I ignored. The way she studied my keys, my documents, the way her eyes lingered on the lockbox in the hallway closet. I see now that she was measuring, calculating, waiting. But at the time, I thought nothing of it. I was simply grateful that my daughter, who lived a busy life in the city, was making time for me. I often invited my neighbor, Carolyn Brooks, over for coffee. Carolyn had lived next door for more than 20 years, and she was as close to me as any sister. Her son, Daniel, grew up playing in my yard, calling me Aunt Helen. They were the kind of neighbors who looked out for you, who noticed if the newspaper sat too long on the porch. Carolyn, more than once, hinted that Samantha seemed a little too interested in my affairs. I brushed it off. "She's my daughter," I said with a laugh. "She's just being practical." But deep down, maybe a part of me knew. It was in the quiet evenings, after Samantha had left, that unease would creep in. I would sit by the window, the golden light fading through the curtains, and ask myself why my daughter seemed so different now. Why her hugs felt more like obligations than gestures of love. Why her eyes, when they met mine, seemed to be searching for something else entirely. I told myself not to dwell on it. Life is hard enough without turning every shadow into a threat. Yet, even then, I could feel the weight of something pressing in, as though the very walls of my house held secrets I could not see. If someone had told me then what was coming, that the very child I sacrificed for would slip poison into my tea and use my own fingerprints against me, I would have called them cruel for even suggesting it. I would have said, "Not my Samantha. She may be a little restless, but she loves me. She would never." How wrong I was. At the time, though, I was still blissfully unaware. I went about my days, tending to my garden, volunteering at the church pantry, waving to Carolyn from across the fence. I believed in the safety of routine. I believed that the worst of my battles had already been fought and that the years ahead would be gentle. It was a false peace, one that would shatter sooner than I could imagine. The first time it happened, I told myself it was nothing more than fatigue. I had been working in the garden all afternoon, trimming the rose bushes, bending over too long to clear the weeds. My body was not as strong as it once had been, and I blamed the dizziness on age. When Samantha showed up with takeout Chinese food that evening, I welcomed her with relief. "Mom, you look pale," she said, unpacking cartons onto the kitchen table. "Oh, just a little tired," I told her, lowering myself into the chair. "I've been out with the roses again. They keep me busier than I expected." She smiled, though it seemed to me more like a smirk than a smile. "Well, good thing I brought dinner. You need to take it easy. Let me do something for you for a change." The words warmed me, even if her tone didn't. I told myself she cared. I wanted to believe it. She filled my plate and poured me a glass of iced tea, her manicured hand resting just a beat too long on the glass before sliding it toward me. I was too distracted to notice. The meal tasted normal enough, though halfway through I began to feel lightheaded. The conversation grew fuzzy, as though her voice came from a tunnel far away. I remember her asking me something about my bank account, if I had online access, whether I knew my login information, but my mind was sluggish, heavy. I waved her off and told her I was too tired to think. She guided me to the sofa, covered me with the quilt, and that was the last I remembered until morning. When I woke, the house was quiet. Samantha was gone. My head throbbed, my mouth dry as if I had slept for years instead of hours. The carton of food was still on the counter, neatly folded and closed. Something about it bothered me, but I brushed the thought aside. I convinced myself it was just exhaustion. Age plays tricks on you, I reasoned. Bodies don't bounce back the way they once did. But the second time it happened, I could no longer deny that something was wrong. It was a Sunday afternoon. Carolyn and I had gone to church together that morning, and afterward she came over for coffee. We sat on the porch, the autumn leaves swirling around our feet, talking about everything from hymns to the rising price of groceries. She noticed my weariness. "You've been looking off lately, Helen," she said gently. "Is everything all right?" "Just tired," I answered. Though even as I said it, I felt the weight of unspoken fears pressing on me. Later that day, Samantha came by again, this time with a homemade casserole. She insisted on staying for dinner. Again I felt grateful, though a small voice inside whispered caution. I ignored it. Halfway through the meal, my eyelids grew heavy. The fork slipped from my hand. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick, clumsy. Samantha's face blurred before me. She said something I could not make out the words, and then darkness swallowed me. I woke hours later in my bedroom. The casserole dish was washed and set aside. My purse, which I had left in the living room, lay open on the dresser. The contents looked undisturbed, but the sight of it unsettled me. I checked for my wallet, my keys. Everything was there. Still, unease gnawed at me. I told myself that maybe I had left the purse in the bedroom and forgotten. Maybe Samantha had only been tidying up. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my daughter was incapable of violating my trust. But Carolyn's words returned to me, sharper now. "You've been looking off lately." In the days that followed, I grew more vigilant. I began locking the small box in the closet with more care, double-checking it when I thought of it. I kept my purse close at hand. Still, whenever Samantha visited, I found myself battling against drowsiness, as though my own body had turned against me. One evening after she left, I called Carolyn. My voice trembled. "Do you ever Do you ever feel like you can't trust the people you love most? She was quiet a moment, then answered, Helen, I've known you a long time, and I've seen the way Samantha looks around when she's here. I didn't want to say anything to hurt you, but yes, I've noticed things. What kind of things? She asks questions, always about your accounts, your papers. She watches where you put things. Helen, I don't think it's just curiosity. And/or three. I pressed a hand to my forehead, my stomach sinking. She's my daughter, Carolyn. I know, she said softly. But love doesn't blind us to the truth. Sometimes it makes us see it too late. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old house. Shadows moved across the ceiling, branches swaying in the streetlight. My heart ached with a fear I could not name. The third incident shattered any illusions I still clung to. It was a chilly October evening. Samantha had brought over a bottle of wine. She poured me a glass, and we sat together in the living room, the television flickering with some news program I barely followed. We toasted to health and happiness. I forced a smile, but something in her eyes unsettled me. The wine was rich, a little too sweet. Within minutes, the room tilted. My heart raced. I excused myself to the bathroom, gripping the walls for balance. My reflection in the mirror shocked me. Pale, eyes glassy, lips dry. I stumbled back into the hallway and caught a glimpse of Samantha at the dining table, rifling through my papers. She froze when she saw me, then smiled too quickly. "Oh, Mom, I was just organizing these for you." The lie was too smooth, too rehearsed. For the first time, I felt a sharp stab of clarity. This was no coincidence. This was no act of kindness. Something was terribly wrong. I pretended not to notice, letting her tuck the papers back. I mumbled that I needed to lie down, and she fussed over me, guiding me to the sofa, tucking a blanket around me like she always did. But as my eyelids sank and the darkness closed in, one thought burned in my mind. She is doing this to me. When I woke the next morning, Carolyn was knocking at the door. She had seen Samantha leave late at night and grew concerned. My body still felt heavy, but I managed to rise and let her in. Carolyn looked at me with alarm. "Helen, you don't look right. What's going on?" And then, for the first time, I admitted it aloud. My voice shook. I think Samantha is drugging me." Carolyn gasped, covering her mouth. "Helen, oh dear Lord." Saying it broke something inside me. It made the fear real, undeniable. I was no longer imagining shadows. I was standing in the heart of them. I didn't know what to do next. This was my child, my own flesh and blood. How do you turn against your daughter? How do you accuse her of something so monstrous? Yet I also knew that if I stayed silent, I could lose everything, not just my money or my house, but my very life. That morning, Carolyn made me promise that I would be cautious, that I would not drink or eat anything Samantha gave me until we understood what was happening. She pressed my hand firmly in hers. "Helen, listen to me. You are not alone. I will stand with you." Ah, her words steadied me, though my heart still quaked. Because even with Carolyn's help, I knew I was facing a storm. I could hardly comprehend one that came not from strangers or thieves, but from the daughter I had once held as a baby in my arms. And I feared that the worst was yet to come. I had always believed that evil came from outside, from strangers, from bad influences, from people who had no place in your life. I never imagined it could come from the very heart of your family. But once I admitted the truth to myself that Samantha was drugging me, the world looked different. My own home no longer felt like a sanctuary. Every corner of it seemed touched by betrayal. I began to notice small things that I had once overlooked. My checkbook was no longer in the drawer where I kept it. It appeared on the kitchen counter one morning, as though it had walked there on its own. A stack of mail I had not opened was neatly sliced open and tucked back in place. My phone, which I usually left on the charger by the nightstand, would sometimes be face down on the coffee table, its screen smudged with fingerprints that weren't mine. The realization chilled me. She was not only drugging me, she was combing through my life piece by piece, looking for ways to take it apart. I confided in Carolyn, who listened with quiet intensity. One afternoon we sat at the little cafe downtown. the kind with brick walls and chalkboard menus. I sipped black coffee, though my stomach churned too much to enjoy it. "What do I do?" I whispered. "How do I fight my own daughter?" Carolyn reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Helen, I know this is tearing you apart, but you can't let her win. You worked your whole life for what you have, and more than that, you don't deserve to be treated this way." "But she's my child," I murmured. The words felt like a chain around my neck. How do I turn against my own flesh and blood? "You're not turning against her," Carolyn said firmly. "You're standing up for yourself. For the truth. If you let this go on, you could lose everything, including your health. Do you understand what she's doing could kill you?" I nodded slowly, though tears stung my eyes. The thought of Samantha's betrayal was almost too heavy to bear. Yet somewhere deep down, I knew Carolyn was right. It was Daniel, Carolyn's son, who gave me the strength to take the first step. He had always been like family to me. When he was a boy, he used to help me rake leaves in the yard, running through the piles with a laugh that made the whole neighborhood smile. Now he was a grown man, working in IT, sharp-minded and protective of those he cared about. When Carolyn told him about my suspicions, he came to see me immediately. "Aunt Helen," he said, using the name he'd always called me, "I think we need to take this seriously. If Samantha's been accessing your accounts or documents, we need to check." His calm, steady presence reassured me. Together, we went through my files. Sure enough, some of the documents looked tampered with. The deed to my house had been removed from its envelope and refolded clumsily, the edges worn. Statements from my retirement account showed login attempts at odd hours, times when I was asleep, or certainly not near a computer. Daniel looked up at me, his jaw set. "She's not just thinking about this. She's acting on it." I felt the floor drop beneath me. My hands trembled as I held the papers. "My own daughter," I whispered. "How could she do this to me?" Daniel's eyes softened. "I don't know, Aunt Helen, but we'll figure it out. You're not alone." The comfort in those words nearly undid me. I had spent weeks trapped in fear and confusion, but now there was a glimmer of hope. If Samantha thought she could outsmart me, she had forgotten that I was not as weak as she believed. I still had fight in me. We began to plan quietly. Daniel helped me change my passwords, setting up two-factor authentication that Samantha would not easily bypass. We moved my most important documents into a safe deposit box at the bank, one Samantha didn't know about. I also began keeping a journal, recording every suspicious incident, every meal that left me dizzy, every unexplained withdrawal. Meanwhile, Samantha grew bolder. She came by more often, her visits framed as concern. "Mom, I worry about you being alone," she would say, brushing invisible dust from the armchair. "Maybe I should take over some of your finances, just to make things easier." End quote. Each time she spoke, her words sounded like poisoned honey, sweet on the surface, deadly beneath. I played along. I smiled, nodded, acted drowsy when I felt her watching. Let her believe she had me under control. All the while, I was writing everything down, preparing. The hardest part was hiding my heartbreak. At night, when the house was silent, I would sit at the kitchen table and stare at the faded photographs on the wall, pictures of Samantha as a child, her hair in braids, her smile wide and genuine. I asked myself over and over, where had that little girl gone? What had twisted her heart so deeply that she would harm the very woman who gave her life? But there were no answers, only the hollow ache of betrayal. It was Daniel who urged me to take the next step. "Aunt Helen, it's time to think about evidence. If she's drugging you, we need proof." The thought terrified me. Proof meant acknowledging the full weight of what was happening. Proof meant there was no turning back, no pretending it was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew he was right. So we devised a plan. The next time Samantha brought food or drink, I would save some of it, carefully sealed away. Daniel knew someone who could test it discreetly. Carolyn agreed to be present during the next visit, both as a witness and a comfort to me. When the day came, I was trembling inside, but I forced myself to act normal. Samantha arrived with a bright smile and a container of soup. "I thought you'd like something warm," she said, setting it on the stove. Carolyn was already there, knitting in the living room. I saw the brief flicker of annoyance cross Samantha's face when she realized she wasn't alone with me. We ate together, Samantha insisting I take a second bowl. I pretended to grow drowsy, resting my head against my hand. She watched me closely, her eyes glittering with something I no longer recognized as love. When she went to the bathroom, Carolyn and I quickly poured a portion of the soup into a sealed jar Daniel had provided. I tucked it into a bag under the sink, my hands shaking. Later, after Samantha left, Carolyn squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Helen. You're stronger than you think." That night, I cried in my bed. Not from weakness, but from the unbearable weight of truth. My daughter was poisoning me. There was no longer any doubt. Daniel took the sample the next morning. He promised to have it tested quickly. In the meantime, I tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. But inside, everything had. I no longer looked at Samantha as my child. I looked at her as someone who had chosen greed over blood, lies over love. That realization broke me, but it also lit a fire I had not felt in years. If she wanted to strip me of my dignity, my life, my home, she would find that I was not so easy to erase. I would fight back, quietly, carefully. And when the truth came to light, it would not be me who was undone. The waiting was the hardest part. After Daniel took the jar of soup to be tested, I felt like I was holding my breath every minute of every day. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting Samantha to show up unannounced, half terrified she already knew I was on to her. The days crawled by slowly. I tried to distract myself with gardening, with church duties, with crossword puzzles in the morning paper. But my mind always returned to the same questions. What if the test showed nothing? What if I had imagined everything? What if the weight of suspicion had poisoned me more than anything Samantha ever slipped into my food? A week later, Daniel came by in the evening. His face was grave, his hands steady as he set a manila envelope on my kitchen table. "It came back positive," he said simply. The room tilted, though not from drugs this time, from truth. "What? What was it?" I asked, my voice little more than a whisper. "A strong sedative. Enough to make someone confused, disoriented, even unconscious for hours. If you'd had more, Aunt Helen, it could have been dangerous. Very dangerous." I pressed my hands together to stop their trembling. There it was, the confirmation I dreaded and needed. My daughter had poisoned me. Daniel's eyes softened. "I know this is hard to hear, but we have proof now. Solid proof." Tears welled in my eyes. I turned toward the window, where the last light of evening painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold. For years, I had believed that Samantha's ambition was just a phase, something she would outgrow. But there was no denying it now. She hadn't just betrayed my trust, she had endangered my life. "Daniel," I said, my voice breaking, "how do you fight your own child? How do you stop someone you love more than life itself?" He came around the table and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. Carolyn and I were with you. Whatever happens next, you won't face it by yourself." His words steadied me, though the ache inside didn't lessen. If anything, it grew heavier. That night, I sat in the living room with Carolyn. The test results lay on the coffee table between us, stark and undeniable. "You have two choices," she said gently. "You can take this to the police right now, or you can wait, gather more evidence, and make sure there's no way she can wriggle out of this." My heart ached at the thought of marching into a police station, handing them proof that my daughter was trying to kill me. But another part of me, the part that had spent decades balancing school budgets, raising a child alone, and holding a family together after loss, knew that rushing could be a mistake. "She's clever," I whispered. "If I go too soon, she'll twist it. She'll say, 'I'm confused,' that I'm sick. We have to wait. We have to let her think she's winning." Carolyn nodded slowly. "That takes strength, Helen, more than most people have." Strength. The word lingered in my mind long after she went home. I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. But maybe broken people could still fight. So I began my quiet war. The next time Samantha visited, I smiled warmly as she came through the door. I let her fuss over me, let her pour me tea. I even took a sip, pretending to grow drowsy. But while she thought I was drifting into sleep, I slipped the rest into a small container hidden in my sleeve. Later, I added it to my growing collection of evidence. Every phone call, every visit, Every suspicious remark, I wrote it all down. Daniel helped me record dates and times, making sure nothing could be dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman. It was a strange kind of acting, pretending to be weaker than I was, letting Samantha believe she had control. But as the weeks passed, I noticed something unexpected. The more I pretended, the stronger I felt inside. I was no longer a victim stumbling in the dark. I was a mother protecting herself, guarding what was hers. Still, there were nights when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the silence of the house pressing in around me. I thought of the little girl who once curled up in my lap, asking for bedtime stories. I thought of the teenager who stormed out of the house after arguments, only to come back hours later for comfort. I thought of the woman she had become, and the monster she was turning into. Love and grief twisted together in my chest until I could hardly tell one from the other. One evening, Samantha came by with documents in her hand. She spread them across the table, her smile too bright. "Mom, I've been thinking. It's time to get your affairs in order. You should update your will, just in case." Her tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp, watching me carefully. I forced a chuckle. "You always were the practical one, Samantha. But don't worry, everything's already in place." She frowned slightly, her gaze flicking to the hallway closet, the very place where my old lockbox used to be. She didn't know I had already moved everything. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of," she said smoothly. For the first time, I looked her straight in the eye, letting a small smile play on my lips. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I always take care of myself." The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes was small, but I saw it. And for the first time, I felt the tiniest shift of power. Later that week, Daniel confirmed that the second food sample also contained sedatives. The evidence was mounting, brick by brick, wall by wall. Samantha had no idea she was building her own prison. I began to prepare myself for the inevitable confrontation. It terrified me, the thought of standing across from my daughter and exposing her lies. But a quiet strength was rising in me, one I hadn't felt in years. I thought of my husband, gone so many years now. What would he say if he saw me wavering? He would tell me to stand tall, to protect what we built together. And so I did. Each time Samantha visited, I let her play her game, let her believe she was slowly tightening the noose. All the while I was loosening the rope, thread by thread. I didn't know when the moment would come, but I knew this much. When it did, I would be ready. Because I was not the helpless woman she believed me to be. I was her mother. And mothers, even when betrayed, even when broken, could still fight with a strength their children never saw coming. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Samantha showed her hand more clearly than ever before. The autumn air had grown sharper, the kind that makes you pull your sweater tighter as you walk across the porch. I was raking leaves when she pulled into the driveway, her car gleaming as if it had just rolled out of a showroom. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached. Her tone was brisk, businesslike. I leaned on the rake, my breath clouding in the chilly air. "Of course, sweetheart. Come inside." She followed me into the kitchen, her perfume filling the room. She set her leather handbag on the table and pulled out a stack of papers. I felt my stomach tighten. "These are just some forms that need your signature," she said smoothly. "It's about simplifying things, making sure your property and accounts are easier to manage. You know, in case something ever happens. M." Her words were laced with honey, but the wolf showed in her eyes. I lowered myself into the chair, my heart pounding. I picked up the first document. It was filled with legal jargon, but one line stood out clear as day. Transfer of ownership. She was trying to take my house. My home. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. "This seems complicated, Samantha. I'll need time to look it over." Her smile faltered, just for a moment. "Mom, you can trust me. It's all standard. Just sign at the bottom." I met her gaze. For the first time, I didn't look away. "I think I'll have my lawyer review it." The air shifted between us. I could see the irritation flicker across her face before she smoothed it into a practiced smile. "Of course, if that makes you comfortable." But her eyes told a different story. After she left, I sat at the table staring at the papers. My hands shook, not from weakness but from fury. How dare she? How dare my own child try to rob me under the guise of love? Carolyn came by that evening. I showed her the documents, and her face tightened. Helen, this is it. She's not just circling anymore. She's moving in for the kill. I nodded. Then it's time I stopped pretending to be the prey. Together with Daniel, we formed a new plan. He suggested setting up hidden cameras in the house. At first, I balked. The idea of recording my own daughter felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I could bear. But then I remembered the fog of drugs, the nights I woke disoriented, the sight of her rifling through my things. The line had already been crossed by her. Within a few days, Daniel had discreet cameras in place, one in the kitchen, one near my desk, and one by the hallway closet where I used to keep the lockbox. Don't act differently, he warned. Let her think everything is the same. The more confident she feels, the more careless she'll become. It wasn't easy. Every time Samantha came by, my stomach clenched with dread. She laughed, she smiled, she asked about my health, all while her eyes flicked to the very places we were watching. I played along, offering her tea, listening as she spoke about her plans for a bigger apartment, a new car, trips she wanted to take, all dreams fueled by money she had no intention of earning honestly. Then it happened. One Friday evening, she came over with a bottle of wine and her usual smile. She poured me a glass, insisting I drink. I pretended to sip, leaving most untouched. After a while, I leaned back in my chair, letting my eyelids droop. Thinking I was asleep, she rose quietly. I watched through half-closed eyes as she moved to my desk. She slipped on a pair of gloves from her purse, then began pulling out folders, scanning documents, snapping photos with her phone. My heart hammered, but I stayed still. Later, after she left, Daniel and I reviewed the footage. There it was clear as daylight. Samantha, my own daughter, caught on camera rifling through my life. The evidence piled higher with each visit. Emails she sent from my account, small withdrawals from my bank, and always the food and drink laced with sedatives. I could no longer pretend this was just desperation or a phase. This was deliberate. This was calculated, and it was unforgivable. Yet even with the proof in my hands, I wrestled with myself at night. She was my child. Could I really hand her over to the law? Could I watch her led away in handcuffs, knowing the whole town would whisper about the daughter who tried to poison her own mother? But then I remembered the dizziness, the helplessness, the nights I might not have woken at all, and the answer became clearer with each memory. Yes, I could, because if I didn't stop her, she would not stop herself. That night, I stood at the window, watching the leaves scatter across the yard. I whispered a prayer, not for myself, but for Samantha, that one day she might see the ruin she had chosen. That one day, she might understand the cost of betraying the very person who loved her most. But prayers would not protect me. Action would. And so, with Carolyn and Daniel beside me, I prepared for the moment when the truth would no longer be hidden. The hunter thought she had cornered her prey, but she had forgotten. A mother, when pushed to the edge, can become something far stronger than prey. The first frost came early that year. I remember stepping out onto the porch one morning and seeing the grass glittering like it had been dusted with diamonds. The air was sharp in my lungs, and for a brief moment, it gave me hope, like the world itself was reminding me that even the hardest nights could end in clarity. But clarity often brings pain. Samantha came by that same afternoon. She was dressed impeccably, as always her coat expensive, her hair perfectly styled, her smile sharp as glass. She carried a casserole dish, her old trick, and set it on the counter with exaggerated care. "Thought you could use a little comfort food," she said, brushing her hair back as though she hadn't a worry in the world. I forced a smile. "That's thoughtful of you." I didn't touch the food. Instead, I busied myself with the kettle, pouring hot water into my favorite teacup. I could feel her eyes on me, assessing, calculating. "Mom," she began casually, "have you thought more about those documents I left? It's really important we get things squared away. I don't want you stressing about it." I turned, meeting her gaze head on. "I told you, Samantha. I'll have them reviewed. I'm in no rush." Her smile didn't falter, but I saw her jaw tighten. "You know, if something were to happen, it could get messy. I'm just trying to protect you." Her words carried an edge that chilled me. For the first time, I didn't feel fear in her presence. I felt anger, righteous, burning anger. When she left that evening, Daniel came over. We watched the footage together. Samantha slipping pills into the casserole while my back was turned. Clear as day. "This is enough," Daniel said, his voice firm. "We can take this to the police right now." But I shook my head. "Not yet. She'll deny it. She'll say I'm confused, or sick, or making it up. I want her cornered so tightly that there's no way out. I want her to know exactly what she's done before the world does." Daniel looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "Aunt Helen, you're braver than anyone I know." I didn't feel brave. I felt like a mother with a broken heart and a need for justice. In the days that followed, Samantha grew bolder. She called me constantly, asking if I'd signed the papers. She showed up unannounced, peeking into corners of the house, opening drawers when she thought I wasn't looking. She even began making comments about what she would do with the house someday. End quote. I played along, nodding vaguely, offering her tea I never let her touch. But inside, my resolve hardened. It was Carolyn who finally said what I had been avoiding. One evening, we sat by the fire in my living room, the flames casting flickering shadows on the walls. "Helen," she said softly, "you can't keep carrying this alone. It's time." I stared into the fire, watching the wood crackle and burn. "Part of me still wants to protect her," I admitted. "Part of me hopes she'll come to her senses, realize what she's doing before it's too late." "And the other part?" Carolyn asked gently. "The other part knows she won't stop until someone makes her." Carolyn reached over and took my hand. "Then let's make sure it's you who stops her, on your terms." Her words planted a seed in me. I didn't just want Samantha caught, I wanted her to know I was the one who saw through her lies, that I was stronger than she believed. So we set the trap. The next time Samantha came, I acted weaker than ever. I shuffled slowly to the table, sighed heavily, let my hands tremble as I lifted my teacup. She watched me with thinly veiled satisfaction. "You really should let me handle things, Mom," she said sweetly. "It would be so much easier for you." I gave her a tired smile. "Maybe you're right." Her eyes lit up. She pulled the papers from her bag, sliding them across the table. "Just sign here. It'll be all taken care of." End quote. I took the pen, my hand shaking not from age, but from fury held in check. I hovered over the line, then set the pen down deliberately. "You know," I said quietly, "it's funny how the soup and the wine you bring always make me so tired. Funny how my bank account shows withdrawals I never made. Funny how my documents look tampered with when you leave." Her face froze. For the first time, she lost her composure. "Mom, what are you talking about?" she said quickly, too quickly. I leaned back, my voice steady now. "I'm talking about the cameras in this house, the recordings of you drugging my food, the tests that prove what you've been doing." Her eyes widened, panic flashing before she masked it with anger. "You're lying. You're confused. Carolyn and Daniel are filling your head with nonsense." "No," I interrupted sharply. "For once in your life, Samantha, stop pretending. I know. I've known for weeks." Silence hung heavy between us. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her hands clenching into fists. "You don't understand," she hissed. "You never gave me what I deserved. You held me back my whole life. This house, your money, it should be mine. I earned it by being your daughter." The words sliced through me, but I stood my ground. "You didn't earn it, Samantha. You tried to steal it. You betrayed me. And now you'll answer for it." Her face twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought she might lunge across the table. But instead, she grabbed her bag, stuffed the papers inside, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I sat there trembling, not from fear but from release. The mask had fallen. I had seen the truth in her eyes, heard it in her own words. That night, Daniel and I copied every piece of footage, every test result, every document. The file was thick, undeniable. Carolyn insisted on staying the night, just in case Samantha returned. As I lay awake in my bed, listening to the steady hum of the furnace, I realized something. The moment of reckoning was close. Samantha thought she was the hunter, but she was walking straight into the trap she had set for me. And when the truth came crashing down, I would not cower. I would stand tall, even if my heart broke into pieces. Because no matter how much I loved her, no matter how much I had sacrificed for her, I could not let my daughter destroy me. The frost outside thickened that night, blanketing the world in silence. But inside my heart, a fire burned hotter than it had in years. I was ready. The days after our confrontation were tense, in ways I can hardly describe. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound outside the window made me wonder if Samantha was coming back. She had stormed out of the house, but I knew my daughter well enough to know she wasn't finished. When greed takes root that deeply, it doesn't let go. I tried to carry on with my routine. I went to church on Sunday, where the hymns felt like a balm to my weary heart. I tended my roses, their petals long gone but their stems needing care before winter. I made soup and froze leftovers, the way I always had. On the surface, life went on. But underneath, my nerves buzzed like live wires. Daniel checked in often, stopping by after work. He reassured me that the evidence we had was airtight. Aunt Helen, even the police can't ignore this. We've got recordings, test results, financial records. She can't talk her way out of it. I nodded, though my heart still ached. Proof didn't erase the pain of betrayal. It didn't erase the memories of birthday cakes and bedtime stories, of scraped knees I kissed better, of the child who once whispered, "I love you, Mommy," before drifting to sleep. But proof gave me strength, and strength was what I needed now. It didn't take long for Samantha to make her next move. She showed up on a cold Thursday evening, unannounced as usual. I heard the crunch of her tires on the driveway and braced myself. She swept into the house without waiting for an invitation, her smile brittle. "Mom, we need to clear the air," she said, setting her purse on the counter. I kept my tone even. "Do we?" "Yes," she snapped, then softened her voice. "I think we got off on the wrong foot the other day. I didn't mean to upset you. I just worry about you being alone. You need someone to look out for you." I studied her carefully. Her words were polished, but her eyes gave her away. They darted around the room, landing on my desk, the closet, the very places she still longed to conquer. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly, "but I'm quite capable of looking out for myself." Her smile tightened. "You don't have to do everything alone, Mom. Let me help you. Just sign the papers. It'll all be taken care of." End F. There it was again, the demand, dressed up as kindness. I shook my head. Not tonight. For a moment, her mask slipped. Anger flashed across her face, sharp and raw. She caught herself quickly, forcing a laugh. "Fine, another time." But as she left, slamming the door behind her, I knew she was growing desperate, and desperation makes people reckless. That weekend, Daniel came by with new updates. He had been monitoring my accounts closely. "She tried again," he told me, his brow furrowed. "There was an attempt to reset your online banking password yesterday. Luckily, she didn't get through, but it's only a matter of time before she slips up." Carolyn, who sat with us at the table, shook her head. "That girl is digging her own grave." I swallowed hard. "She already has. She just doesn't know it yet." It was Carolyn who suggested we go one step further. "Helen, you've been gathering evidence quietly, but maybe it's time to give her enough rope to hang herself. Let her believe she's winning, then catch her red-handed." The thought terrified me, but at the same time, it felt right. I wanted the truth to be undeniable, not just to the police, not just to the courts, but to Samantha herself. I wanted her to see that her mother was not a fool. So we set the stage. I told Samantha I was ready to sign. I called her one evening, my voice carefully weakened, as though I'd been worn down by her persistence. "Come by tomorrow," I said. "We'll talk." Oh. Her excitement was palpable, even over the phone. "Of course, Mom. You won't regret this." The next day, Daniel set up extra cameras and made sure the recorder was running. Carolyn insisted on being nearby in case anything went wrong. When Samantha arrived, she was practically glowing. She laid the papers out on the table, sliding the pen toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just sign here," she said softly, "and everything will be simple. M." I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly. I let it hover over the line, then set it down. "Samantha," I said quietly, "why don't you sign first? Show me how it's done." Her eyes narrowed. "It doesn't work that way, Mom. You're the one who has to sign." Why is that? I pressed. She stiffened. Because it's your property, your accounts. That's how it works. And once I sign, I continued, my voice steady now, everything becomes yours, doesn't it? The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I leaned forward. I know what you've been doing. The food, the wine, the pills, the withdrawals from my accounts, the cameras caught everything. We have the tests, the recordings, the proof. Her hands shook as she gathered the papers. You're lying. You've lost your mind. No, I said firmly. For once, I see clearly. Art. She stood abruptly, stuffing the documents back into her bag. You'll regret this, she hissed. I met her glare with calm I didn't feel. No, Samantha. You will. She stormed out, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. The door slammed behind her, rattling the glass panes. For a long moment, the house was silent. Then Carolyn, who had been listening from the hallway, stepped into the room. Her eyes met mine, filled with both sorrow and pride. You did it, Helen, she whispered. You faced her. I nodded slowly, my body trembling from the confrontation. It's not over, I said. But now she knows I'm not afraid. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The betrayal still cut deep, but beneath the pain was a flicker of something stronger. Resolve. Samantha thought she could break me. She thought she could strip me of everything I had worked for. But she was wrong. I was not broken. I was waiting. And the moment she made her next mistake, the world would finally see her for what she had become. The days after Samantha stormed out of my house were strangely quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting her car in the driveway, her sharp knock on the door, her perfume filling my kitchen. But for a week, nothing. The silence should have comforted me, but instead it gnawed at me. Samantha was not one to give up. If she was quiet, it meant she was plotting. Daniel reassured me. She knows you've caught on. She'll be cautious now. That's good. It means she's on the defensive. But Carolyn shook her head. No, Daniel. You don't know greed the way I've seen it in people. This isn't over. She's too far in to back out. Carolyn was right. It was a chilly evening when Samantha returned, her car pulling into the driveway just as the sun was setting. I watched from the window, my heart hammering. She walked in with her usual confidence, though her smile was tighter, her eyes sharper. Mom, she said sweetly, I hate how we left things. I don't want us to fight. I thought I'd come over and make peace. I studied her carefully. Her tone was smooth, but her eyes darted around the room, searching. She was looking for weakness. I forced a smile. That's thoughtful, Samantha. Come, sit, I'll make some tea. She followed me into the kitchen, setting her purse on the counter. I saw her glance at my desk, the same way she always did, her hunger barely concealed. Over tea, she began again. Mom, I just worry about you. If something happened, who would take care of things? You don't want strangers handling your affairs. You want family. You want me. Her words were honeyed poison, but I kept my face calm. I suppose you're right, I said softly. It would be awful to have things left in a mess. Her eyes lit up, hope sparking like a flame. Exactly. So let's just get those papers signed. Tonight. Then you can rest easy. I set my teacup down, meeting her gaze. You know, Samantha, I've been thinking a lot about family, about what it means to be taken care of. She tilted her head, cautious. And I realized something, I said, my voice steady. Family doesn't betray you. Family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't drug your tea. Her face froze. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the raw anger beneath. You're paranoid, she snapped. You're sick, Mom. You don't know what you're saying. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. I know exactly what I'm saying, and so will the police. When they see the videos, the test results, the records. It's all documented, Samantha. Every single thing. She laughed, but the sound was brittle, hollow. No one will believe you. You're an old woman. You forget things. You imagine things. I'll tell them you're confused. I smiled a small, cold smile. That might have worked once, but not now, not anymore. I'm not confused. I've never been clearer in my life. Her hands trembled slightly as she grabbed her purse. You'll regret this, she spat, her voice low and venomous. "I won't let you ruin everything." And with that, she stormed out again. I sat there for a long time after she left, the teacup cooling in front of me. My heart was heavy, but beneath the sorrow was something new. Certainty. She had shown her true face, and I had met her with strength. That night, Daniel and Carolyn sat with me as we went over the evidence once more. The recordings were undeniable, Samantha slipping powders into my food, rifling through my papers, muttering to herself as she took photos with her phone. The test results were clear. The bank records spoke for themselves. "She's hanging by a thread," Daniel said quietly. "And she doesn't even realize it." Carolyn put a hand on mine. "The next time she pushes, Helen, that's when we take everything to the police. No more waiting, no more chances." I nodded. The next time will be the last time. But even as I said it, my chest ached. I thought of the little girl who once pressed wildflowers into my hand, saying, "These are for you, Mommy." I thought of her laughter, her tears, the years of motherhood that had defined my life. And I knew, when the time came, it wouldn't just be Samantha on trial. It would be me, too, standing in judgment of the child I loved more than life itself. Still, the choice had been made. Samantha thought she was circling her prey, closing in for the kill. But the truth was, she was walking straight into the snare. And when the trap snapped shut, there would be no escape. I had been waiting for the moment when Samantha would slip. The lies, the games, the poison, none of it could go on forever. Greed has a way of making people careless. It happened on a cold November night. The wind rattled the windows, and I sat in the living room with a blanket over my lap, knitting needles in my hands more for comfort than purpose. Carolyn was with me, her presence steadying as always. Then, without warning, Samantha burst through the door. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes wild, her movements hurried. She didn't even bother with her usual false pleasantries. "Mom, I need you to sign the papers tonight," she demanded, slamming her purse onto the table. I looked up calmly. "Why the rush?" "Because it's important," she snapped. "I can't keep waiting. You're dragging your feet, and it's reckless. Don't you want to make sure everything's secure?" Carolyn set her knitting aside. "Helen already told you she'd review them, Samantha. You can't force her." Samantha shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "This is none of your business." And my hands tightened on the blanket. "Actually, it is her business. Carolyn has been a better daughter to me these past few months than you've been in years." The words slipped out before I could stop them, but I didn't regret them. For a split second, I saw the fury in Samantha's eyes. She yanked the papers from her bag and shoved them toward me. "Sign them, now!" The demand echoed through the room. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay steady. "No," I said simply. Her face twisted. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can embarrass me, make me look like some kind of criminal. But without me, you're nothing. You'd be alone, forgotten." I rose slowly from my chair, my knees stiff but my voice firm. "I was alone long before you started this, Samantha. You left me the moment you let greed take over your heart." She laughed bitterly. "You don't understand, Mom. You've always held me back. You never gave me enough, never trusted me to handle things. This is mine, all of it. It should have been mine all along." Her voice had risen, shrill and desperate. Carolyn stood now too, her arms crossed, her eyes filled with fire. "You're wrong, Samantha. Nothing here belongs to you, not one thing." And then, as if fate had chosen that exact moment, Daniel walked through the front door. He froze, taking in the scene, the scattered papers, Samantha's wild expression, my steady stance. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low but commanding. Samantha spun toward him, her words tumbling out. "She's lying. She's been poisoned against me. You don't know what she's like. She's senile. She forgets things. She doesn't understand what's happening." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes fixed on her. "I know exactly what's happening. We all do." And then he pulled out his phone, tapping the screen. Within seconds, Samantha's voice filled the room, recorded clips from the cameras we'd hidden, her muttering as she rifled through my papers, the sound of pills dropping into my tea. Her whisper, "It'll all be mine soon." Her face went pale. You set me up." she stammered. No, I said firmly. You set yourself up. We just made sure the truth couldn't stay hidden. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the wind howling outside. Then Samantha's fury boiled over. She swept the papers from the table, scattering them like leaves in a storm. You'll regret this, she screamed. All of you, I'll make sure you regret it. Daniel's voice was steady. The only one who's going to regret anything is you, Samantha. We have everything we need. The police will hear it all. Her chest heaved, her eyes darting from one of us to the other, like a trapped animal searching for escape. Finally, she grabbed her purse and bolted out the door, the sound of her car roaring into the night. The three of us stood in the wreckage of her rage, papers scattered, the echo of her voice still hanging heavy in the air. I sank back into my chair, my body trembling. Carolyn knelt beside me, gripping my hand. It's over, Helen. She's exposed herself. There's no going back now. But I shook my head. Not over. Not yet. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. We need to take this to the police before she tries again. Daniel nodded. Tomorrow morning, I'll go with you. We'll bring everything. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the wind, my heart heavy with sorrow and fear. Samantha had shown her true colors. The daughter I once knew was gone, replaced by someone I hardly recognized. But there was no turning back. The time for silence had ended. The time for truth had come. And in the morning, with the weight of evidence in my hands and Carolyn and Daniel at my side, I would finally do what had to be done, even if it shattered what was left of my heart. The next morning, the sky was heavy with gray clouds, the kind that pressed down and made the world feel smaller. I dressed carefully, pulling on my warm coat and scarf, my hands trembling not from the cold but from what I knew I had to do. Carolyn arrived first, her face set in quiet determination. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, though my voice felt trapped in my throat. As ready as I'll ever be. Daniel pulled into the driveway a few minutes later, carrying a black folder thick with papers, photos, and USB drives. "We've got everything," he said firmly. "Evidence they can't ignore." Together, we drove to the Columbus Police Department. My heart pounded as the building came into view, its brick walls stern and unyielding. For years, I had only seen this place in passing. Never once did I think I would walk through its doors, carrying the weight of betrayal in my hands. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh, the air filled with the faint scent of coffee and disinfectant. A young officer at the desk looked up, his expression polite but detached. "Can I help you?" Daniel stepped forward. "We need to speak to a detective. It's about elder abuse, financial fraud, and attempted poisoning." The officer blinked, then straightened. "One moment, please." Within minutes, we were ushered into a small room. A detective entered, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a notepad in his hand. He introduced himself as Detective Harris and gestured for us to sit. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked. I took a deep breath. My voice shook at first, but I steadied it. "It's my daughter. She's been drugging me, trying to take my home, my accounts, everything I own." His brows furrowed slightly, but he didn't dismiss me. Instead, he looked at Daniel. Daniel opened the folder and began laying out evidence piece by piece. The test results showing sedatives in my food, the bank statements with suspicious withdrawals, the photos of tampered documents, and finally, the video footage. Detective Harris watched intently as the screen showed Samantha slipping powder into my tea, rifling through my desk, muttering to herself. His expression hardened with each clip. When the last video ended, silence filled the room. Finally, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. "This is serious," he said. "Very serious. Mrs. Mitchell, you understand what this means?" I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. "It means my daughter has betrayed me, and it means I can't stay silent anymore." He tapped his pen against the table. "With this evidence, we can open a formal investigation. But you need to be prepared once we move forward. Things will escalate quickly. Your daughter may try to contact you, intimidate you. We'll do what we can to protect you, but it won't be easy." "I'm not asking for easy," I whispered. "I'm asking for justice." Detective Harris studied me for a long moment, then nodded. We'll get started immediately. When we left the station, the air outside felt colder, sharper. But for the first time in months, I felt lighter. The burden of silence had lifted. I had spoken the truth. Carolyn squeezed my arm as we walked to the car. "You were brave, Helen. Braver than I think I could have been." I shook my head. It didn't feel like bravery. It felt like heartbreak. Daniel placed the folder back in the car, his jaw tight. "Whatever happens next, remember this. You're not alone. We'll see this through together." That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the fire as it flickered in the hearth. My mind drifted through memories the first time I held Samantha in my arms, the sound of her laughter echoing down the hallway, the way she once clung to me after nightmares. I whispered into the quiet room, "Where did you go, my girl? How did you lose your way so completely?" There was no answer, only the crackle of the flames. The following days passed in a blur. Detectives came by the house, collecting the original food samples, taking my statement in detail. They spoke to Carolyn and Daniel, confirming timelines, cross-checking events. They asked me to recount everything, every dizzy spell, every suspicious visit, every word Samantha had said. It was exhausting, reliving it all, but I pushed through. Each word was another step toward the truth being heard. Then came the hardest part, the waiting. I knew Samantha wouldn't sit idle. True enough, she called me 2 days later. "Mom," she said, her voice unusually sweet. "I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm worried about you." I gripped the phone tightly. "I'm fine, Samantha." There was a pause, then her tone sharpened. "You've been talking to people, haven't you? You've been telling lies about me." "No lies," I said quietly. "Only the truth." Her breath hissed through the line. "You'll regret this." Then the call ended. My hands shook as I set the phone down, but instead of fear, I felt resolve. She knew. And soon, so would everyone else. 2 days later, Detective Harris called. His voice was steady, professional. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've seen enough to move forward. We'll be taking your daughter in for questioning. You should be prepared for this to happen soon." The words hit me like a stone. This was it, the moment I had dreaded and prayed for all at once. That night, I sat by the window, watching the first flakes of snow drift down. The world outside was quiet, pure, untouched. Inside, my heart was anything but. I whispered another prayer, not for myself this time, but for Samantha, that she might see what she had done before it was too late to save even a piece of her soul. But prayers couldn't undo what was coming. The storm had broken, and there was no turning it back. The knock at the door came early in the morning, just after sunrise. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when I heard it, 3 firm raps that echoed through the house. My heart leapt into my throat. Carolyn, who had stayed the night, met my eyes across the kitchen table. Neither of us spoke. I opened the door to find Detective Harris standing there, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. His expression was grave but not unkind. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "we're moving forward today. We have a warrant for your daughter's arrest. We'll be bringing her in for questioning." My breath caught. Even though I had known this moment was coming, the reality of it still felt like a blow to the chest. "Today?" I whispered. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We'll keep you updated. For now, I just need you to stay here. We don't want you in harm's way." I nodded, my hands gripping the edge of the doorframe to steady myself. "Thank you, Detective." When he left, Carolyn closed the door gently behind him. She touched my arm. "It's starting, Helen. There's no turning back now." End. I sank into a chair, staring at the steam rising from my coffee. My heart was torn in two. On one side was relief, finally, the truth was being confronted. On the other was grief so deep it felt like drowning. My daughter, my only child, was about to be led away in handcuffs. Hours passed like years. I busied myself with small tasks, folding laundry, watering my plants, straightening books on the shelves, but my mind was elsewhere. I pictured Samantha's face when the police arrived at her door. Would she scream, cry, deny everything? Or would she finally, at last, admit the truth? It was mid-afternoon when Detective Harris called. His voice was calm, measured. "Mrs. Mitchell, we have your daughter in custody. She's being questioned now." My knees went weak. I gripped the counter for balance. "What?" What did she say? Nothing yet, he said. She's denying everything. But we've shown her the footage. It's only a matter of time before she realizes how strong the case island. After I hung up, Carolyn wrapped me in her arms. I wept into her shoulder, the kind of raw, aching sobs I hadn't let myself release in months. It wasn't victory, I felt it was loss. The loss of the daughter I thought I knew. The loss of the family I had dreamed of keeping whole. That night, Daniel came by. He sat with me in the living room, the glow of the fireplace soft on his face. She'll try to fight it, he said gently. She'll blame you, blame me, blame everyone but herself. But the truth is on your side, Aunt Helen, and the truth will stand. I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. I just keep asking myself, when did I lose her? Was there a moment I could have changed things? A word I could have said? Daniel's voice was steady. This isn't your fault. You gave her everything, your time, your love, your sacrifice. What she chose to do with it, that's on her. His words soothed me, though the ache remained. The next day, Detective Harris asked me to come to the station. We'd like you to make an official statement, Mrs. Mitchell. It will strengthen the case. Walking into that building again felt like stepping into another world. The walls were lined with photographs of officers, plaques of service. People bustled around with papers and radios, their voices blending into a hum of urgency. They led me into a quiet room where Harris sat across from me, his notepad open. A tape recorder clicked on. Please state your name for the record, he said. I took a deep breath. My name is Helen Mitchell. And then I told it all. From the first dizzy spell after Samantha's dinner to the confrontation when she shoved papers in my face, to the recordings and the threats. Every detail spilled out, steady and clear, though my voice shook at times with the weight of it. When I finished, Harris leaned back, his eyes filled with something like respect. You've been through hell, Mrs. Mitchell. But your courage may have saved your life and stopped her from hurting you further. I swallowed hard. She's still my daughter. He nodded solemnly. And that makes what you've done even braver. Afterward, I sat in the lobby, staring out the window as the gray sky pressed low. Somewhere in this very building, Samantha was sitting in another room, her lies unraveling. I wondered if she thought of me, if she hated me, if she regretted anything at all. When Daniel drove me home, the streets of Columbus blurred past in streaks of light and shadow. My house looked the same as it always had, the porch light glowing warmly, the roses sleeping under frost, but I knew nothing would ever truly be the same. That night, alone in my room, I lay awake long after midnight. I thought of Samantha as a little girl, her laughter echoing down the hall, her small hand slipping into mine. And then I thought of the woman who had sat across from me with poison in her bag and greed in her eyes. I whispered into the darkness, I loved you, Samantha. I loved you more than life itself. And still, you chose this. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but beneath the grief was a new kind of strength. The truth was no longer hidden. The lies had been exposed. The fight was far from over. There would be trials, hearings, more painful days ahead. But the hardest part was done. I had faced the truth. I had spoken it out loud. And no matter what happened next, I would not be silenced again. The news spread faster than I expected. Within a day of Samantha's arrest, neighbors were knocking on my door with casseroles and words of comfort, their eyes full of pity and curiosity. I could feel the weight of their questions, though most of them were too polite to ask outright. They wanted to know how a daughter could turn against her own mother. Truth be told, I wanted to know the same. Carolyn sat with me that evening, the two of us sipping coffee in the dim light of the kitchen. She watched me carefully, as though she feared I might break apart at any moment. How are you holding up? She asked softly. I stared into my cup. I don't know. One moment I feel relief, like a burden has been lifted. The next, I feel like I've lost my child forever. She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. You didn't lose her today, Helen. You lost her the moment she chose lies over love. This is just the truth finally catching up. Her words made sense, but my heart refused to accept them fully. Samantha was still my daughter. Even now, even after all she had done, part of me longed to see her walk through the door, to hear her say, I'm sorry, Mom, and mean it. The next day, Detective Harris called with an update. "She's being held until her preliminary hearing," he told me. "The evidence is strong. She's still denying everything, but the videos and test results are difficult to dispute." Did she say anything about me?" I asked, my voice trembling. There was a pause. "She blames you," he admitted. "She says you turned against her. But Mrs. Mitchell, that's just part of the process. People in her situation often lash out rather than accept responsibility." I thanked him, though the words pierced me like knives. She blamed me. In her mind, I was the enemy, not the victim. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the clock ticking loudly on the wall, my mind replaying years of memories. Samantha's first day of school, the Christmas mornings when her eyes sparkled brighter than the lights on the tree. The arguments we had during her teenage years, always ending with slammed doors, but, eventually, reconciliations. Had I missed a warning sign? Was there a moment I could have changed her path? Or had greed always been there, waiting to bloom in the shadows? Daniel came by the following afternoon. He carried groceries, insisting on stocking my fridge and pantry. "You don't need to be worrying about errands right now," he said firmly. As he unloaded the bags, I asked him, "Do you think I was a bad mother?" He froze, then turned to me with wide eyes. "What? No, Aunt Helen, you were the best mother you could possibly be. Samantha made her own choices. This isn't your fault." I wanted to believe him, but guilt is a stubborn companion. Later, Carolyn joined us, and the three of us ate dinner together at my table. For the first time in weeks, laughter returned to my house, though it felt faint, fragile, as if it might shatter with the wrong word. After they left, I found myself drawn to the box of old photographs in my closet. I spread them across the dining table, images of Samantha at every stage of life. A toddler in pigtails, her cheeks smeared with chocolate cake. A teenager in her prom dress, her eyes filled with excitement. A young woman in a cap and gown, the world at her feet. I pressed a hand to one picture, whispering through tears, "Where did you go, my sweet girl? When did you stop being mine?" The preliminary hearing came a few days later. I didn't attend. I wasn't ready to face her in court, but Harris kept me informed. The judge reviewed the evidence and ordered her held for trial. Bail was set, though high enough that she couldn't easily walk free. When I heard the news, I felt both relief and sorrow. Relief that she couldn't come near me, that I could finally sleep without fear of her sudden arrival. Sorrow because each step in this process pulled her further away from me, deeper into a pit she had dug with her own hands. That night, I prayed longer than I had in years. I prayed for strength to endure what was coming. I prayed for justice, but also for mercy. And, most of all, I prayed for Samantha, that something inside her heart might soften, that she might see the wreckage she had caused before it was too late. When I finished, I sat in silence, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the walls. The house was quiet, but inside me, a storm still raged. I had chosen the path of truth, but the cost of that choice was heavy. And though the law now held my daughter, it was love and grief that held me prisoner. The days leading up to the trial felt heavier than any I had ever lived. Each morning I woke with a knot in my stomach, knowing that soon I would stand in a courtroom and face Samantha again, not as my daughter, but as the woman accused of trying to destroy me. Carolyn kept me company as much as she could. She cooked meals, brought over puzzles, tried to keep my mind occupied. But even in the comfort of her presence, I felt the looming weight of what was to come. One night, as we sat together in the living room, she put down her knitting and looked at me with gentle eyes. "Helen, you've carried this burden long enough. Once you step into that courtroom and tell your story, it will be out of your hands. Justice will do the rest." I nodded slowly, though my heart ached. I keep thinking about her as a child, the way she used to run to me after school, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders, the way she whispered secrets into my ear. How do I reconcile that little girl with the woman I'm about to face? Carolyn sighed, her voice low. "Maybe you don't. Maybe you just accept that they are both true, the child you loved and the woman she became." Her words lingered in my mind long after she left. Daniel came by the next day with more updates from Detective Harris. "They've gathered everything, Aunt Helen. The prosecution has the videos, the test results, your statements, mine, and Mom's. They've built a strong case. You won't be standing alone up there." His reassurance steadied me, though the thought of testifying still made my knees weak. I wasn't afraid of Samantha's anger anymore. I was afraid of the grief that would wash over me when I looked into her eyes and saw nothing of the daughter I once knew. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift down under the streetlight. The world looked so peaceful, so pure, while my own heart felt like a battlefield. I prayed again long, desperate prayers for strength, for courage, for peace. And once more, I prayed for Samantha, that somehow, some way, she might see the truth in time to save herself from complete ruin. Morning came too quickly. I dressed in my best suit, the same one I had worn to church on Easter Sundays. Carolyn drove me to the courthouse, Daniel following behind in his car. My hands shook the whole way there, my stomach twisting into knots. The courthouse was a tall, imposing building, its stone steps dusted with snow. As I walked inside, the sound of my footsteps echoed against the marble floors. The air smelled faintly of paper and old wood polish, a mixture that felt both solemn and suffocating. In the courtroom, I sat quietly as people filed in. The lawyers whispered to one another. Papers shuffled. The judge's bench loomed above us all. My heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone must hear it. Then she entered. Samantha, my daughter. She walked in wearing a plain suit, her wrists bound in handcuffs that were quickly removed. Her hair was neatly styled, her expression carefully composed, but I saw the fury burning just beneath the surface. Our eyes met for the briefest moment. Hers were cold, defiant, mine filled with tears I fought to hold back. I wanted to run to her, to embrace her, to beg her to stop this madness. But I stayed seated, my hands clenched in my lap. That little girl was gone. What stood before me was someone else entirely. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The trial began. The lawyers spoke, laying out their cases. Evidence was presented: the videos, the test results, the bank records. Each piece struck like a hammer against the fragile remnants of the bond between us. As I listened, my heart broke over and over again. I had lived these moments, but hearing them laid out in cold, legal terms made it all feel unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Then came the moment I had dreaded most. My name was called. I rose slowly, my legs trembling, and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff swore me in, and I took my seat, my hands gripping the wooden arms of the chair. The lawyer asked me to tell my story. So I did. I spoke of the meals that left me dizzy, the nights I woke disoriented, the papers shoved in front of me. I described the fear that grew in me, the heartbreak of realizing my own daughter was behind it. My voice shook at times, but I held steady. Every word was the truth. At one point, I glanced at Samantha. She sat stiffly, her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a hard line. She looked at me not as a daughter looks at her mother, but as an enemy looks at her opponent. That look cut deeper than any blade. When I finished, silence filled the room. The lawyer nodded, thanking me, and I stepped down slowly. My knees weak, but my spirit unbroken. Back at my seat, Carolyn took my hand, squeezing it tightly. Daniel gave me a small nod, pride shining in his eyes. I had done it. I had spoken the truth. But as I sat there, the weight of it pressed down on me. Speaking the truth hadn't healed the wound. If anything, it had made the loss clearer, sharper. Still, I knew it was necessary. Because love without truth is not love at all. And no matter how much it hurt, the truth was all I had left. The courtroom had its own rhythm, like the beating of a heavy drum. Papers shuffled, voices rose and fell, the gavel cracked down when tempers flared. But beneath it all was a steady, relentless march toward truth, and I could feel it pressing down on me with every passing hour. Samantha sat at the defense table, her face carefully blank. But I knew her well enough to read the flickers. She couldn't hide the tightness around her mouth, the dart of her eyes, the restless shifting of her hands. She was unraveling, even if she didn't want to admit it. The prosecution laid out the case with ruthless clarity. They played the videos. Samantha pouring powders into my wine, rifling through my desk, muttering words she thought no one would ever hear. They presented the toxicology reports, the bank statements, the altered documents. Piece by piece, they built the portrait of betrayal. Each time a new piece of evidence was shown, I felt another crack in my heart. It was all true, yes, but seeing it displayed so plainly, so coldly, made me feel like I was watching my daughter disappear before my very eyes. When the defense finally rose to speak, their arguments felt desperate. They painted me as confused, vulnerable, prone to exaggeration. They claimed Samantha had only been helping me, that the substances found were misunderstandings, that the withdrawals were errors. But the evidence was too strong. I saw it in the faces of the jury, sympathy for me, disbelief for her excuses. Samantha must have seen it too, because as the trial dragged on, her composure began to crack. One afternoon, during cross-examination, the prosecutor asked her directly, "Miss Mitchell, can you explain why we have video footage of you slipping sedatives into your mother's food?" Her face flushed red. "It wasn't what it looks like. She was tired. She needed help sleeping." The lawyer pressed, "Help sleeping? By putting unprescribed sedatives in her drink without her knowledge?" Samantha's voice rose, sharp and brittle. "She never appreciated me. She never trusted me. Everything she has should have been mine." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge slammed the gavel, calling for order, but the damage was done. In that one outburst, Samantha had revealed what the evidence had already whispered. This was not about love or care. It was about greed. I sat frozen, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, my heart pounding. Her words cut me deeper than any poison ever could. Everything she has should have been mine. I had given her everything I could, my time, my energy, my sacrifices, and still it had not been enough. As the trial neared its end, I found myself staring at Samantha more than at the lawyers or the judge. I searched her face for some sign of the little girl I had once known, the daughter who had clung to me during thunderstorms, who had kissed my cheek before running off to school. But all I saw now was bitterness and rage. On the final day of testimony, the prosecutor delivered closing arguments that struck like thunder. This is not a case of misunderstanding. This is a case of deliberate betrayal. Mrs. Mitchell's daughter chose greed over love, deception over truth. She not only tried to rob her mother of her life's savings, but she risked her very life in the process. That is not care. That is crime. The defense tried to salvage what they could, but their words felt hollow. Then the judge instructed the jury, and they withdrew to deliberate. The weight was unbearable. I sat with Carolyn and Daniel in the hallway, my hands trembling, my breath shallow. "What if they don't believe it?" I whispered. Daniel shook his head firmly. "They will. The truth is too strong to ignore." Carolyn placed her arm around me. "Whatever the verdict, Helen, you've already done the hardest part. You stood up. You spoke the truth. That's victory in itself." After what felt like an eternity but was only a few hours, the jury returned. We filed back into the courtroom, my legs unsteady, my heart in my throat. The forepersons stood, the papers trembling slightly in their hands. The room was silent. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Samantha Mitchell, guilty on all counts." The words rang through the courtroom like a bell tolling for the dead. Samantha's face contorted, rage flashing across her features. "This is a lie! You can't do this to me!" she screamed, her voice shrill, desperate. Officers moved quickly to restrain her as she thrashed against them. The judge's gavel pounded, calling for order, but I barely heard it. My vision blurred with tears. It was over. The truth had been spoken, the verdict delivered. Justice had prevailed. And yet, as I watched my daughter struggle against the officers, screaming and sobbing, I felt no triumph, only sorrow. This was not the ending I had once dreamed for her. I had prayed for her success, her happiness, her peace. Instead, she stood condemned by her own choices, her own greed. As they led her away, her eyes met mine one final time. There was no love in them, no remorse, only fury and blame. I wanted to reach out, to tell her I still loved her despite everything, but my voice failed me. The distance between us was too great, a chasm carved by betrayal that no bridge could cross. When the courtroom emptied, I remained seated, staring at the wooden table before me. My hands lay folded in my lap, trembling. Carolyn knelt beside me, her arms around my shoulders, while Daniel stood quietly, his presence solid as stone. "You did it, Aunt Helen," he said softly. "It's over." But it didn't feel over. It felt like something inside me had been shattered beyond repair. Justice had been served, yes, but justice does not heal a mother's heart. As we left the courthouse, snow was falling gently, covering the world in white. I tilted my face upward, letting the flakes melt on my skin. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to feel the weight lifting, even as grief pressed heavier. The trial was done. But the story of my daughter, the story of my broken heart, was far from finished. The days after the trial felt strangely empty. For months I had lived under the shadow of fear and betrayal, my every breath consumed by Samantha's schemes. Now that it was over, I expected to feel lighter, freer. Instead, I felt like a house after a storm still standing, but scarred, pieces missing that could never be restored. Neighbors came by with kind words, their voices gentle, their eyes careful. Some of them whispered their disbelief. How could a daughter do such things? I had no answers for them. I only smiled faintly and said, "Life doesn't always go the way we hope." Inside my home, silence became my companion. No more late-night arguments. No more tense dinners with tainted food. No more pretending not to notice the lies in my daughter's eyes. The quiet should have been a comfort, but sometimes it felt like grief pressing against the walls. I often found myself wandering the house, stopping at old photographs on the walls. Samantha as a child, her laughter frozen in time, her eyes bright with innocence. I touched the frames with trembling fingers and whispered prayers for the girl she once was. At church, people prayed for me. They prayed for strength, for peace, for healing. And I prayed too, not just for myself, but for Samantha. I prayed that one day she would find the light she had lost, that even within the walls she now faced, she might remember what love felt like. One evening, Daniel sat with me on the porch. The autumn had given way to winter, and snow blanketed the yard in soft white. We sat bundled in coats, sipping hot chocolate from steaming mugs. "You know," he said softly, "you're the strongest person I've ever known." I shook my head. "No, Daniel, I'm just a mother who refused to give up. Strong isn't what I feel. Broken is what I feel." "Maybe," he said, "but broken people can still shine, sometimes even brighter than before." His words touched something deep inside me. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps strength wasn't about being unbroken. It was about standing, even when the pieces of your heart lay scattered around you. Carolyn often reminded me that justice had been done. "You protected yourself, Helen. You saved your life. And you showed others that silence is never the answer when truth is at stake." Her words carried weight. Because in the end, that was what this story had become. Not just about betrayal, but about finding courage to speak when silence could have destroyed me. The seasons will keep turning. I will keep tending my roses even if the garden feels emptier now. I will keep sitting by the window, watching the world go by, holding on to memories that bring both joy and sorrow. And maybe, just maybe, I will find a kind of peace in knowing that I did what was right, even when it broke me. To anyone who hears my story, I want to say this: hold fast to the truth, even when it hurts. Love your family, but do not blind yourself to their flaws. And above all, remember that protecting yourself does not mean you have stopped loving it, means you have chosen to survive. As for me, I will go on. I will carry the ache of a mother who lost her daughter not to death, but to choices she could not undo. I will carry it quietly, with dignity, because that is the only way forward. But I will also carry hope, hope that somewhere, in the darkness of her own making, Samantha might still remember my love. Hope that one day, she might choose to become someone different. Until then, I will keep living, I will keep breathing, I will keep trusting that even broken hearts can beat strong. Because life, with all its pain and betrayal, is still a gift. And though my daughter chose greed, I will choose love, always. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the number 1 in the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving, and I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.